The first thing Alpha King Adrian Blackwood noticed was not that Claire Bennett was gone. It was that no one knew what to do without her. Morning council began at sunrise, as it always did, beneath the high silver windows of Blackwood Palace. Frost clung to the glass. Blue ceremonial flames burned along the walls. Elders took their places around the long stone table. Noble messengers waited near the lower steps with sealed letters in hand. Guards stood perfectly still beneath the banners of the royal wolf. Everything looked prepared. Everything looked powerful. Everything looked exactly the way a kingdom should look before it began to fail. Adrian entered in black council attire, his expression cold, his crown resting lightly above dark hair that had never bent for anyone. Every person in the chamber rose. He did not look at them. He walked to the head of the table and sat on the Alpha King's throne. Out of habit, his gaze moved forward, not left. It had been years since he needed to check whether Claire was beside him. She was always there, always seated in the Luna chair to his left, always with the correct documents stacked in order, always ready to lean close and remind him which elder would object first, which envoy needed soft handling, which treaty clause could start a border dispute if spoken too sharply. Adrian had never called that dependence. He had called it efficiency. The council waited. Silence stretched. Then Elder Thomas Hale cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, shall we begin with the Eastern Envoy or the Northern Grain Petition?" Adrian looked toward the table. No documents rested before him. Only a blank marble surface polished so clean it reflected the blue firelight. He frowned. The Eastern Envoy. Obviously, the Eastern Envoy stepped forward, then stopped. "Your Majesty, I was told the Northern Petition would be heard first." A slight stir moved through the room. Adrian's eyes narrowed. Told by whom? No one answered. Not quickly enough. Elder Hale glanced left, toward the Luna chair. Only then did Adrian look. The chair was empty. Not delayed empty. Not someone stepped away empty. Empty in a way that seemed deliberate. Its dark velvet cushion held no folded shawl, no council ledger, no pale hand resting quietly near a stack of notes. Instead, one small object lay at the center of the seat. A silver Luna clasp. Claire's clasp. The one Adrian had fastened at her throat himself 3 winters ago before a winter feast, when he had told her, privately, that she made the kingdom look steady. The entire chamber went still. Adrian stared at it, and for one strange second, his mind refused to understand what his eyes had already seen. "Where is Lady Claire?" someone whispered. The question moved softly through the room, then returned heavier. Where was Lady Claire? Where were the corrected trade ledgers? Where was the border map with her private markings? Where was the woman who knew the first sentence of every negotiation before anyone else knew there would be a negotiation at all? Adrian stood slowly. The chair remained empty. The clasp remained silent. And somewhere inside him, beneath pride, beneath irritation, beneath the kingly certainty that Claire Bennett would always be where duty placed her, something cold opened its eyes. The first mistake came before anyone dared speak Claire's name again. The Eastern Envoy unfolded his sealed letter and waited for the formal greeting. Adrian knew the greeting existed. He had heard it every spring for 7 years, spoken in the careful order that kept the Eastern Pax proud but not offended. Yet the words did not come to him. Not because he had forgotten them entirely, because Claire had always placed the correct parchment beneath his hand before he needed it. Elder Hale searched through the documents on the table, face tightening. The reception script should be with the envoy packet. Another elder lifted a folder. "This is the Northern Grain Petition." "Then where is the envoy packet?" No one answered. The Eastern envoy's expression cooled by degrees. Adrian felt irritation rise first. It was easier than worry. "Proceed without it," he ordered. The envoy bowed stiffly. "With respect, Your Majesty, the greeting confirms whether Blackwood accepts the river terms before negotiation begins." Silence. Adrian looked toward the empty Luna chair again before he could stop himself. The silver clasp sat there in the center of the cushion, small and bright under the blue flames. Accusing. Elder Hale cleared his throat. "Perhaps Lady Claire left the packet in her study." "Then send for it," Adrian said. A servant rushed out immediately. The council tried to continue. It did not. The Northern Grain Petition was called second, only for the merchant representative to step forward and insist his group had been promised first hearing because their wagons had been waiting since dawn. Adrian's jaw tightened. Who promised that? Again, The same silence. Thinner now. More frightened. A young clerk finally whispered, "Lady Claire usually assigns the order after reviewing weather reports." Usually. The word moved through the chamber like a door opening onto something no one wanted to see. Usually, Claire had already solved this. Usually, Claire had already softened the insult before it became one. Usually, Claire had already made Adrian look prepared. A commotion broke out near the lower steps. Two pack leaders from the Western Hills had been seated too close together. Their families had a blood debt still under review, and everyone in the room seemed to know it only after they stood nearly chest to chest, voices rising beneath the council banners. "Separate them," Adrian said sharply. Guards moved at once. One pack leader snapped. "Lady Claire promised the revised terms would be read before we were placed in the same room." The other added, bitterly. She was the only one who bothered to hear both sides. That sentence landed badly. Adrian's eyes cut toward him. The man lowered his gaze, but not before the truth had already entered the room. Claire had heard them. Claire had remembered them. Claire had kept peace in places Adrian had not known were close to breaking. The servant returned from Claire's study pale and empty-handed. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing low, "her study is locked. The key is not with the household keys." Adrian's voice dropped. "Where is it?" The servant swallowed. His eyes flicked once toward the empty chair. Toward the clasp. "Lady Claire kept it, my king." The chamber went silent again. Not the formal silence of respect. The uncomfortable silence of people beginning to understand dependence after the person depended upon had disappeared. Adrian looked at the chair. He had seen Claire sit there through fever, through winter councils, through nights when half the kingdom wanted something from him and the other half feared what would happen if he gave it. He had watched her lower her voice beside him, pass him notes, correct names, delay conflicts, remember griefs, prevent insult. Watched, not valued. There was a difference, and the difference had chosen to leave a silver clasp behind. Elder Hale spoke carefully. "Your Majesty, perhaps Lady Claire is unwell." Adrian turned slowly. "Unwell." The elder's face paled. "Or delayed." Delayed. The council wanted that word. Adrian almost wanted it too. Delayed meant temporary. Delayed meant forgivable. Delayed meant the empty seat would fill before anyone had to admit what it meant. But the clasp said otherwise. Claire had not forgotten it. She had placed it there, on the seat, at the center of the room, in the one place Adrian had trained himself not to look because he assumed she would always be there. Outside the council hall, bells rang for the second hour after sunrise. Inside, no one moved. Then, quietly, the Eastern envoy folded his letter. "Perhaps we should wait until Lady Claire is found." Found. Not summoned. Not fetched. Found. Adrian's hand closed slowly at his side. The word disturbed him more than it should have. Because somewhere beneath his anger, his wolf had begun to understand what the council had not yet dared say aloud. Claire Bennett was not late. She was gone. The night before the empty seats silenced the council, Claire Bennett had still been arranging the kingdom into order. No one saw her do it. That was how most of her work happened. Quietly, beneath notice, between rooms where powerful men spoke loudly and corridors where servants waited with questions they were afraid to ask. Claire moved through Blackwood Palace after midnight with a stack of council documents balanced against one arm and 3 sealed messages tucked beneath the silver clasp at her throat. The clasp was heavier than usual. Or perhaps she had only begun to notice its weight. She had worn it for 3 years. Adrian had fastened it himself before the winter feast, his fingers brushing the side of her neck while he said, "You make this kingdom look steady." At the time, Claire had almost smiled. Almost. Because some foolish, starving part of her had turned that sentence into affection. Now, as she walked through the long corridor toward the council wing, she wondered if he had ever meant anything beyond usefulness. The palace was still awake in the wrong places. Music drifted faintly from the southern hall, where nobles continued drinking under gold chandeliers. Sienna Parker's laughter carried once through an open archway, bright enough for everyone nearby to admire. Claire did not turn her head. She had seen enough at dinner. Adrian leaning slightly toward Sienna when she spoke. Adrian allowing her hand to rest on his sleeve longer than courtesy required. Adrian introducing her to the Western delegation with a warmth he rarely used when naming his own Luna. Not betrayal. Not exactly. That was the cruelty of it. Nothing obvious enough to confront. Only 1,000 small permissions given to another woman in public, while Claire received duty in private and called it intimacy because she had been lonely too long. She passed the record room and stopped to correct a clerk's misplaced ledger. The grain summaries go beneath northern trade, not domestic tax, she said softly. The clerk flushed. Thank you, my lady. My lady. Never your grace, unless Adrian was nearby. Never Luna, unless ceremonial necessity required it. Claire had stopped reacting to the difference years ago. Reaction changed nothing. It only taught people where the bruise was. She continued toward the council chamber. Tomorrow's session would be difficult. Eastern River terms. Northern grain shortage. Western blood debt. 3 problems that could break into open conflict if handled poorly. Adrian would sit at the head of the table and look immovable. The elders would speak cautiously. The envoys would measure each pause. And Claire would sit to his left, passing him quiet notes, making sure his strength did not become insult before the wrong people. That was what she did. She made him look wise when he was only certain. She made the kingdom look calm when it was only held together by invisible hands. Near the council wing, the lamps burned lower. Voices sounded from behind the carved oak doors. Adrian's voice among them. Claire slowed. She had not expected him there this late. The documents in her arms shifted slightly. She stepped closer, intending to enter and place the files where Elder Hale would find them in the morning. Then she heard her name. Claire will handle it, Adrian said. Calm. Easy. Certain. A councilman laughed under his breath. She handles everything. Another voice asked. And if one day she does not? A pause followed. Small. Dangerous. Claire stood outside the door, one hand resting against the edge of the top folder. For one brief, impossible moment, she waited for Adrian to say something true. Something kind. Something that would make the years behind her less humiliating to remember. Instead, his answer came smoothly. Claire does not leave. She understands duty better than pride. Silence opened inside her. Not sharp. Not loud. Just wide enough for every private promise to fall through. The clasp at her throat felt colder now. The same clasp he had fastened while telling her she made the kingdom steady. Now she understood. He had not been praising her heart. He had been praising the convenience of her staying. Inside, someone chuckled. Claire did not cry. That would have meant surprise. And Claire Bennett was no longer surprised. She only looked down at the documents in her arms, at the work already completed for a kingdom that had never learned to ask whether the woman holding it together was tired. Then she turned away from the council chamber without making a sound. Claire did not go back to her chambers immediately. That would have been too simple, too close to collapse. Instead, she walked the long eastern corridor with the council documents still in her arms, moving past the lamps, past the sleeping portraits, past every polished surface that reflected a woman who looked far calmer than she should have. Behind her, the voices in the council chamber continued. Adrian was still speaking. The elders were still listening. The kingdom was still being arranged for mourning as if Claire Bennett had not just stopped belonging to it. That was the strange part. Nothing changed outside her body. No thunder broke over the palace. No candle went out. No guard turned and saw the exact moment a Luna stopped waiting to be chosen. The world remained ordinary. That felt almost cruel. Claire reached the marble table near the archive doors and stopped. The documents in her arms were complete. Of course they were. Eastern River terms marked in blue. Northern grain petition corrected twice. Western blood debt summary softened enough to prevent bloodshed before breakfast. She had done the work carefully because carefulness had become her language. Even hurt, even tired, even unseen, she had left no loose thread for careless men to trip over. Slowly, she placed the stack on the marble table. Not thrown, not dropped. Placed. Aligned. Seals facing outward. Edges straight. Let the kingdom have what it valued most from her. The labor, not the woman. Her hand remained on the top folder for one heartbeat longer. Then she removed it. The gesture felt small. It was not. For years, Claire had told herself that staying was strength. That patience was dignity. That Adrian's private softness meant more than public distance. She had built a life out of almosts. Almost named. Almost crowned. Almost cherished. Almost enough. Tonight, the word almost finally became too heavy to carry. Footsteps approached from the adjoining corridor. Claire lifted her gaze. Noah Reed, one of Adrian's senior guards, slowed when he saw her standing alone beside the archive table. He was young for his rank, broad-shouldered, steady-eyed, and one of the few people in the palace who had always bowed to her correctly, whether anyone watched or not. "Lady Claire," he said, "is everything all right?" Kindness. Quiet. Unplanned. It nearly hurt more than cruelty. Claire looked at him for a moment, then at the documents. "The council files are finished." Noah's eyes moved to the stack, then back to her face. He noticed too much. Good guards did. Better men knew when not to say everything they saw. "Should I have them delivered inside?" he asked. Claire shook her head. "They will find them." A pause followed. Noah's expression changed only slightly. "My lady." There was a question inside the title. Claire did not answer it. Not yet. She turned away from the table and continued down the corridor. This time, her steps sounded different to her. Not louder, lighter. The clasp at her throat moved against her skin with each breath, silver brushing the hollow below her neck. Adrian's clasp. Adrian's private symbol. Adrian's almost promise. She touched it once, briefly, and felt nothing warm answer. The tenderness she had protected for years did not rise to defend him. No memory came strong enough to weaken her. Not the winter feast. Not the way his fingers had lingered. Not the sentence she had once held like a vow. "You make this kingdom look steady." Yes, she thought. And tomorrow he would learn what it looked like when she stopped. At the end of the corridor, Claire paused beside the council hall entrance. The Luna chair was visible through the half-open side arch, empty in the blue firelight, waiting for morning, waiting for her body to return to its assigned place. She looked at it for a long time. The chair had never been hers. Not truly. It had been where Adrian placed her close enough to serve and far enough to forget. Claire turned from it. No tears. No farewell. No final glance toward the chamber where he still believed she would always be there. By the time she reached the staircase leading to the Luna wing, her decision had become perfectly quiet. Before sunrise, the chair would still be waiting. Claire Bennett would not. Adrian found her halfway up the staircase to the Luna wing. Not because he had followed her with concern. Not because something in the bond had pulled him from the council chamber before pride could stop him. He found her because Elder Hale had opened the side door to collect the files and discovered them waiting on the marble table instead of in Claire's hands. That small disobedience had been enough to send Adrian into the corridor. Enough to make him leave a room full of men who still believed Claire Bennett would return to her place before morning. "Claire." His voice reached her from below. Calm at first, then sharper when she did not immediately turn. "Claire." She stopped on the third step from the landing. Her hand rested lightly on the banister, fingers curved around cold stone. For a moment, she looked at nothing but the shadow of her own hand against the wall. Then she turned. Adrian stood at the foot of the stairs in black council clothes, the blue firelight from the hall behind him cutting hard lines across his face. Beautiful, controlled, familiar in a way that hurt less than it should have. He looked at the empty space in her arms first. No documents, no ledgers, no problem waiting to be solved for him. Then his gaze moved to her face. Something in his expression changed. "Not enough. Never enough. Why did you leave the reports outside?" he asked. Claire almost smiled. Of all the questions he could have asked, he had chosen the work. Of course he had. "They are finished." "That is not what I asked." "It is the only answer that matters to the council." His jaw tightened. "Do not speak to me like that." Once, the warning would have made her lower her eyes. Not from fear. From habit. Tonight, habit had lost its power. Claire descended one step, bringing them closer without giving him the height of command. "Like what?" she asked. Like someone who has finally stopped translating disrespect into patience. Silence moved between them. Adrian's eyes narrowed slightly. "You heard something." Not a question. A calculation. Claire looked at him quietly. "Yes." He exhaled once, controlled and impatient. "Then you know council discussions are often blunt." Bluntness did not surprise me. Then what did? She studied him for a long second. The man she had loved. The king she had served. The almost home she had mistaken for destiny, because sometimes loneliness dressed itself as loyalty and called the costume devotion. "Nothing," she said. That unsettled him. She saw it happen. The brief flicker behind his eyes when anger failed to meet anger. When there were no tears for him to soften, no accusation for him to deny, no dramatic wound he could bandage and call the matter closed. "You are tired," Adrian said at last. "It has been a long season. We will speak tomorrow." There it was. Tomorrow. The word he gave her whenever today required courage. Tomorrow he would name her before the court. Tomorrow he would explain why Sienna stood too close. Tomorrow he would correct the elders. Tomorrow he would make clear what Claire was to him. Tomorrow had become the palace where all his broken promises lived. Claire's hand moved to the silver clasp at her throat. Adrian noticed. His gaze dropped to it, and for the first time that night, something like unease touched his face. "You keep giving tomorrow to a woman you never planned to choose today," she said. The words were quiet. The staircase held them anyway. Adrian went still. "That is not true." "Then say it." He looked at her. "Say what?" "Say, in front of the council waiting behind you, that I am not simply useful. Say that my place beside you is not convenient. Say that when they ask why I sit in that chair, your answer will not be duty." The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of every answer he did not give. Claire nodded once. Not because she was satisfied, because she had expected nothing else. Adrian stepped upward. "Claire." "No," he stopped. One word had never sounded so foreign between them. She lowered her hand from the clasp. "Do not follow me because the chair might be empty tomorrow. Do not reach for me because the kingdom may stumble without me. And do not call this tiredness when it is finally self-respect." His expression hardened, but beneath it, fear had begun to gather. Too late. Too small. "You are my Luna." Claire looked at him, and something old in her chest gave one last ache before going silent. "No," she said softly. "I was your assumption." Then she turned and continued up the stairs, leaving Adrian below her with the council doors open behind him and the first true warning of an empty seat waiting for dawn. Claire did not go to her bedroom first. That would have been what Adrian expected. The Luna wing, the soft lamps, the familiar mirror, the place where he could come later, lower his voice, and turn the wound into another conversation postponed until it no longer had teeth. Instead, Claire walked past her chamber doors without opening them. The corridor beyond the Luna wing narrowed toward the old service stair, where the walls lost their silver trim and the palace stopped pretending every path was built for royalty. Her steps remained steady. Behind her, no footsteps followed. Not yet. Adrian was still at the staircase, perhaps angry, perhaps confused, perhaps finally looking toward the council hall and seeing, for the first time, what tomorrow might look like without her. Good. Let him look. At the bottom of the service stair, Claire entered the small records room beside the council hall. She knew the lock. She knew every lock in Blackwood Palace. Not because anyone had given her authority openly, but because everyone had brought her problems quietly. Missing keys, lost accounts, sealed letters, forgotten routes. Claire had learned the palace the way lonely women learn survival, by noticing everything no one respected enough to explain. The room smelled of parchment, cold stone, and old wax. Claire lit one lamp. Not the chandelier. Not the blue council flames. One lamp was enough. She set her small travel bag on the records table. It had been hidden there for months, behind a drawer of outdated tax rolls no elder ever checked, because Claire had already copied the useful parts into newer ledgers. She had not packed it because she planned to leave tonight. Not exactly. She had packed it because some quiet part of her had known a woman should not live without a way out. Inside were simple things. A gray cloak, a folded travel dress, a coin purse, 2 identity papers bearing the Bennett family seal, a small vial of fever tonic, her mother's plain silver ring. Nothing royal. Nothing Adrian had given her. Nothing that required explanation. Claire changed in the dim light, folding her court gown over the back of a chair. The fabric shimmered softly, beautiful and useless. A dress for sitting close enough to power that strangers assumed she had some. She looked at it for only a moment before turning away. Then she lifted the gray cloak around her shoulders. Its clasp was iron. Dull. Practical. Hers. The silver Luna clasp still rested at her throat. Adrian's clasp. The one he had touched in public often enough to imply importance, but never enough to declare it. Claire raised her hands and unfastened it slowly. The catch resisted once, then opened. The metal came away from her skin with a quiet release. For a second, she held it in her palm. It was beautiful, crescent-shaped, set with a small moonstone at the center, polished from years of wear. A private almost crown. A delicate little lie. Claire closed her fingers around it and left the records room. The council hall was empty now. The blue ceremonial flames burned low along the walls, making the silver banners look pale and ghostly. At the head of the long stone table stood Adrian's throne. To its left, the Luna chair waited. Dark velvet, silver arms, carved wolves at the legs. The chair she had occupied for years without ever fully owning. Claire walked toward it. Her footsteps echoed once, then disappeared into the high ceiling. She stopped before the chair and looked down. How many mornings had she sat there with notes hidden beneath her sleeve? How many insults had she softened before they reached the wrong ears? How many times had Adrian taken her answer without looking at her, signed her solution beneath his name, then accepted the room's respect as if it had belonged to him alone? Claire placed the silver clasp at the exact center of the cushion. Not on his throne, not on the table, on her seat. Let them find it where they had expected to find her. No note, no explanation, no final plea folded beneath it. Adrian knew his own words. The council knew the shape of its dependence. The kingdom would learn by morning. Claire stepped back. The empty chair looked different now. Not abandoned. Awake. She turned toward the side door behind the council dais, the one used by cleaners before dawn and by messengers during war. It opened into the lower garden passage, then the eastern bridge road beyond the inner wall. No guards would watch it until first bell. She knew because she had arranged the guard rotation herself. At the threshold, Claire paused once. Not to reconsider, only to listen. The palace was quiet. Somewhere far above, Adrian's world still believed it had until morning to correct itself. Claire pulled her hood over her hair, opened the side door, and stepped into the cold dark before sunrise. Behind her, the Luna chair remained empty with the silver clasp shining where her body used to be. For the first time in years, Blackwood Palace was exactly as Adrian had made it. Powerful, polished, and missing the woman who had kept it from breaking. By the time Adrian left the council hall, the silver clasp had become impossible to ignore. It remained on the Luna chair through every failed attempt to continue the morning session, bright and silent against dark velvet, while elders stumbled over missing documents and envoys looked toward the empty seat instead of the throne. Adrian had ordered the council suspended before the third hour after sunrise. Not ended. Suspended. As if language could make absence temporary. As if calling the failure delayed could make Claire Bennett late instead of gone. No one argued. They rose carefully, gathering their useless papers, avoiding the chair, avoiding the clasp, avoiding the Alpha King's face. Elder Hale lingered near the table as if he wanted to speak, then thought better of it when Adrian's gaze cut toward him. "Find Lady Claire's chamber key," Adrian said. Hale swallowed. "Your Majesty, Lady Claire keeps her own keys." Of course she did. Adrian had never noticed because the doors he needed opened had always opened. The ledgers he needed appeared. The envoys he needed softened. The kingdom obeyed him through 1,000 quiet mechanisms, and he had mistaken the smoothness for authority. Adrian stepped away from the throne. His eyes moved once more to the Luna chair. The clasp looked smaller from above. That made it worse. A small object had done what no councilman, rival alpha, or border threat had ever managed. It had stopped the room from pretending. Noah Reed waited outside the council doors, posture straight, expression controlled. He had been sent to check the eastern passage, then the lower garden road, then the servants' gate. The answer was already on his face. Adrian hated him for wearing it honestly. "Report," Adrian said. Noah bowed once. "No one has seen Lady Claire since before first bell. The eastern bridge guard found no record of her leaving through the main gate. Because she did not use the main gate." Noah said nothing. That silence was agreement. Adrian turned toward the Luna wing. "Come." They walked through halls Claire had crossed every morning before anyone else woke. Adrian saw them differently now. The narrow table where she left and signed petitions for him to approve. The window alcove where she once waited through a winter fever while healers tended a wounded scout. The small cabinet near the east stair where emergency treaty copies were stored. He knew that because Claire had told him. Twice. He had forgotten. She had not. Her chamber doors stood closed at the end of the Luna wing. Pale morning light framed them from the tall windows nearby. Adrian stopped before the doors and waited for something. A sound. A movement. Some ordinary proof that she was inside. Angry perhaps, wounded perhaps, but inside. Nothing came. Noah offered the spare key taken from the housekeeper after a frantic search. Adrian took it and opened the door himself. The room did not look abandoned. It looked decided. That was the first thing he understood. Not messy, not torn apart, not marked by rage. The bed was made. The curtains were tied back. The fireplace had been cleaned and left cold. On the vanity, her pearl pins remained in a neat glass dish. The court perfume he had once praised remained unopened beside the mirror. Her ceremonial gowns hung in the wardrobe, pale blue, silver, ivory, each one chosen for a woman expected to be seen but never fully named. The crown reserved for official Luna ceremonies rested in its velvet box on the lower shelf. Untouched, Adrian stepped inside slowly. His wolf stirred beneath his skin, restless now, searching for scent and finding only fading traces woven into linen, paper, and air. Claire was everywhere in the room, and nowhere he could reach. Noah remained at the threshold until Adrian said, "Check the wardrobe." The guard moved carefully, respectfully. He opened drawers, then paused. "Practical clothing is missing." Adrian's jaw tightened. "What else?" "Travel boots. A gray cloak, likely. Coin purse, from the look of this compartment. Personal papers. Personal. Not royal. Not gifts. Not anything Adrian could claim was his. Claire had taken only what belonged to the woman beneath the title he had never properly honored. Adrian crossed to the writing desk. It was organized with almost painful precision. 3 sealed packets waited there, labeled in Claire's hand. Eastern Envoy Protocol. Northern Grain Routes. Western Blood Debt Terms. Each one prepared for the council that had collapsed without her. Beneath them lay a smaller sheet containing only a list of names. Servants owed wages, widows awaiting winter cloth, children from the Western Hills needing healer vouchers. Adrian stared at it. Even leaving, she had remembered the people the throne forgot. His throat tightened, but pride rose to strangle the feeling before it could become visible. "She planned this," he said. Noah's voice was quiet. "My king, I think she prepared for the day she might need to." The difference struck harder than accusation. Adrian turned toward him slowly. Noah lowered his gaze, but he did not take the words back. Outside the room, palace bells rang again, calling a council that could not continue. Inside, Adrian looked at the empty wardrobe spaces, the untouched crown, the sealed reports, the cold hearth. He had thought Claire's absence would be an interruption, a wound he could close with command, apology, or time. But this room told the truth with merciless calm. Claire had not left to punish him. She had left because staying had become a smaller kind of death. Adrian reached instinctively for the silver clasp at his side, then remembered it still lay on the empty Luna chair below, waiting for him, accusing him, teaching him too late that some seats were not empty because someone was late. Some seats were empty because the woman who filled them had finally learned to stand. The Luna chair remained empty the next morning. That was when irritation began changing into something Adrian did not want to name. On the first day, he had called the council failure a disruption. On the second, he called it poor preparation. By the third morning, no word remained strong enough to disguise the truth. Claire Bennett's absence had not interrupted the kingdom. It had exposed it. The council hall looked the same each day. Blue ceremonial flames, silver banners, elders in dark robes, envoys seated by rank. Adrian on the Alpha King's throne, expression carved from winter. And to his left, the empty Luna chair. No one had moved the silver clasp. No one had dared. It still rested at the center of the velvet cushion, polished moonstone catching the light whenever the flames shifted. Adrian had ordered no one to touch it. He told himself the order was practical. Evidence. A reminder. Something to return when Claire came back. But by the third day, even he no longer believed that last part fully. Claire had not come back. No note arrived. No servant whispered that she had been seen near the gardens. No guard reported a woman waiting beyond the bridge, tired and regretful and ready to be escorted home. Every search returned with less than before. A fading scent at the eastern road. A market woman who remembered a gray cloak before dawn. A bridge keeper who swore he saw no one because no one had asked him to watch for a Luna traveling without ceremony. That detail angered Adrian more than it should have. Without ceremony, Claire had left his palace as if it had never honored her enough to require one. In council, the damage multiplied. The Eastern envoy refused to proceed until the river terms were clarified in Claire's notation. The northern merchants demanded compensation for delayed grain access. The Western Hill Pact sent word that they would not accept arbitration from Elderhale because Lady Claire had promised to hear their revised testimony herself. Herself. The word repeated in every complaint like a bell. Adrian signed orders, corrected schedules, demanded answers. Still, each solution opened 3 more questions she had already known how to prevent. At the end of the third council, Elder Hale placed a corrected map before him. Your Majesty, this version should match Lady Claire's prior markings. Adrian looked down. The map was wrong. He knew it was wrong before anyone else spoke, not because he understood the border better than Claire had, but because he remembered her voice beside him 2 weeks earlier. Not that ridge. The winter road bends below it. If you mark it higher, the Eastern Patrol will insult the Northern claim. He had nodded then without really listening. Now the memory returned perfectly, uselessly. Adrian took the pen and corrected the line himself. The chamber watched in silence. Like this, he said. Elder Hale stared. Yes, Your Majesty. No one said what all of them understood. Even absent, Claire was still teaching him how to rule. That night, Adrian did not go to his own chambers. He returned to the council hall after the flames had been lowered and the servants had gone. Moonlight entered through the high windows, silvering the long table, the empty chairs, the throne that suddenly looked less powerful without someone beside it to steady what power missed. The Luna chair waited. Adrian stood before it for a long time. Then, slowly, he picked up the silver clasp. It was colder than he expected, small enough to fit in his palm, heavy enough to make his chest tighten. He remembered fastening it at her throat, remembered saying she made the kingdom look steady, remembered how she had looked at him then, soft and hopeful in a way he had rewarded with another delay. Tomorrow, later, when the council is ready, when the kingdom understands, when there is time. He had given Claire 1,000 tomorrows and never once noticed she was running out of reasons to wait for them. Adrian closed his hand around the clasp. The moonstone edge pressed into his skin. Where did you go? He asked the empty room. No answer came. Of course none came. Claire had spent years answering before he asked. Now, finally, he had asked too late. The chair did not look like a seat anymore. It looked like judgment. And for the first time in his reign, Alpha King Adrian Blackwood understood that the place beside him had never been empty because Claire was missing. It had been empty for years because he had never truly let her be seen there. Noah Reed returned near sunset with mud on his boots, and the answer Adrian had been pretending not to fear. The council hall was empty when he entered. Adrian stood beside the Luna chair, the silver clasp closed inside his hand, staring at the western border map spread across the table. 3 roads had been marked in red. 2 neutral crossings had been questioned. The eastern bridge had been circled so many times the parchment had begun to tear beneath the ink. None of it mattered if Claire had chosen the one place his authority could not follow. Noah stopped several steps from the table and bowed. Your Majesty. Adrian did not look up. You found her trail. It was not a question. Noah's silence answered first. Then he said, a stable boy saw Lady Claire cross the old eastern bridge before first bell. Adrian's hand tightened around the clasp. Alone? Yes. Something in him recoiled at that. Not because Claire could not travel alone. She had always been more capable than most people around him. But because he imagined her doing it without guards, without ceremony, without anyone carrying the weight she had spent years carrying for them. Where did she go after the bridge? Noah hesitated. Adrian lifted his eyes. Say it. Toward Bennett Land. The words entered the room softly and changed everything. Bennett Land. Her family's old territory. Small. Independent. Protected by treaty from royal entry unless formally invited. Adrian knew that in the vague way kings knew inconvenient laws someone else handled for them. Claire had handled that treaty. Of course she had. His wolf moved beneath his skin, restless and furious. But even the beast seemed to understand borders when they were built from vows older than command. Elder Hale, standing near the doorway, exhaled too sharply. Your Majesty, if she has reached Bennett Land, we cannot retrieve her by force. Adrian's gaze cut to him. The elder lowered his head at once. I only mean the treaty. I know what you mean. The sentence came colder than he intended. Then again, cold was easier than fear. Adrian looked down at the silver clasp. Moonstone. Crescent silver, a symbol he had thought would keep her near because he had mistaken beautiful almost promises for vows. Prepare, riders, he said. Noah's face remained controlled. How many? Enough to search every road before Bennett border. And beyond it. The room went silent. Adrian looked at him. Noah did not lower his eyes this time. There it was again. the quiet defiance of men who had finally seen the woman he had failed to see. "No further," Adrian said at last. The words tasted like defeat before the search had even begun. They rode before night fully settled. Adrian led them himself. Rain had started again, thin and cold, cutting across the road in silver lines. The silver clasp rested inside his coat near his heart, absurdly light for something that had dragged an entire kingdom into disorder. Behind him, 20 riders spread across the eastern roads. Torches moved through wet dark. Hooves struck mud. His wolf searched every gust for Claire's scent and found only fading traces, washed thin by weather and time. At the old eastern bridge, Adrian dismounted. The stone rail was slick beneath his glove. Below, black water moved quickly beneath the arch. For a moment, he saw her there in his mind. Gray cloak, travel bag, hood drawn low. Not running. Claire would not have run. She would have crossed with steady steps, carrying no crown, no royal jewels, no farewell heavy enough to slow her. Noah approached quietly. The bridge keeper remembers a woman before dawn. Adrian turned. He did not stop her. He said she carried Bennett papers. Of course. Prepared. Legal. Unreachable before he even knew he had lost her. Adrian looked across the bridge toward the dark road beyond. Somewhere ahead, Bennett land waited with old trees, old rights, and the woman whose empty seat had done what armies never had. It had made him feel powerless. "Send word," Adrian said. His voice was low. "Request permission to enter Bennett territory." Noah paused. "Request, Your Majesty?" Adrian's jaw tightened. Once, the word would have offended him. Now it only exposed him. "Yes," he said. "Request." By midnight, the answer came from the Bennett border guard. Not from Claire. Not directly. A folded slip of paper, carried by a rider who did not bow deeply enough to soothe royal pride. Adrian opened it beneath the rain. The message was brief, written in Claire's hand. "The Luna chair is empty because I am no longer willing to fill a place you never truly gave me." No signature. None needed. Adrian read it once. Then again. Around him, the riders waited. Noah looked away. The rain touched the ink, but did not blur it. Claire's words remained clear. That was the cruelty. That was the mercy. Adrian closed his eyes. For 3 days, he had stared at the empty seat, searched roads, questioned servants, blamed delays, corrected maps, held the clasp, and still some ruined part of him had believed finding her trail meant finding a way back. But Claire had not left a trail for him to follow. She had left a boundary. Adrian folded the paper carefully and placed it beside the silver clasp. Then he looked toward Bennett land, dark and silent beyond the rain. "Return to the palace," he said. Noah turned toward him. "Your Majesty?" Adrian did not move. "The search is over." The words broke something quieter than pride. Behind him, Blackwood Kingdom waited, unstable and exposed. Before him, Claire Bennett remained beyond a border he had no right to cross. And for the first time, Adrian understood the empty chair was not asking where she had gone. It was asking why he had waited until she left to notice she had never truly been seated beside him at all. Blackwood Palace did not feel like a kingdom when Adrian returned. It felt like a question no one wanted answered. The riders entered through the eastern gate after midnight, rain dripping from cloaks, horses steaming in the cold. No trumpet announced them. No servant rushed forward with hope. The guards at the gate looked once behind Adrian, saw no gray-cloaked Luna following, and lowered their eyes too quickly. That was how the palace learned before anyone spoke. Claire Bennett was not coming back. Adrian dismounted without a word. The silver clasp rested inside his coat beside the folded message from Bennett land. Together, they felt heavier than armor. Noah Reed followed several paces behind, quiet in the careful way of a man who had witnessed a king lose something and understood that speaking too soon could turn grief into command. Inside the lower hall, the council waited. Elder Hale stood at the front, his robes still damp from pacing near the open doors. Sienna Parker sat beside the hearth in a pale gown, beautiful and untouched by the disorder around her, though even she had begun to look uncertain. The moment Adrian entered, everyone stood. He did not sit. He did not remove his cloak. He walked to the council table and placed Claire's note at the center of it. No one reached for it. No one needed to. The room already knew the shape of refusal. Elder Hale cleared his throat carefully. "Your Majesty, did Lady Claire agree to receive you?" Adrian looked at him. No, the word landed flat. Final. Sienna rose slowly. Adrian, perhaps she only needs time. Women say things when they feel overlooked. The silence after that was immediate. Noah's jaw tightened. Elder Hale looked down. Adrian turned toward Sienna with a calm so cold it stripped the warmth from the hearth. Do not reduce her decision to wounded pride. Sienna's lips parted. I did not mean, you did. His voice did not rise. That made it worse. All of you did. The council went still. Adrian took the silver clasp from inside his coat and placed it beside the note. Moonstone against parchment. Symbol beside truth. For years, she sat to my left while this room took her work, her memory, her patience, and her silence. We called it duty because that sounded cleaner than dependence. Elder Hale's face tightened with shame. No one defended themselves. Cowardice had always worn good manners in council chambers. Adrian looked at the empty chair near the wall, where Claire should have been waiting with a correction no one had asked for, but everyone needed. She warned us without speaking, he said. We ignored her until the seat was empty. Sienna swallowed. And what happens now? Adrian looked at her then. Truly looked. She had been easy to see because she had never been asked to carry anything heavy in silence. The realization was not her fault entirely, but he had made it possible. He had offered public warmth to someone who had not earned the burdens he hid on Claire's shoulders. Now, he said, we learn what she did. By dawn, the palace was awake again. Not in panic this time. In discomfort. Clerks were summoned to the council hall. Servants brought every ledger Claire had marked. Elders opened files they had never bothered to understand. Noah stood by the western map while Adrian read Claire's notes aloud, line by line. Each correction exposing another place where the kingdom had leaned on her and called itself strong. No one sat in the Luna chair. Adrian had ordered it left untouched. The silver clasp remained there again, returned to the center of the velvet cushion before sunrise. Not as bait, not as a promise, as witness. When morning light entered the high windows, Adrian looked at the empty seat and understood something that hurt more than the message from Bennett Land. Claire had not made herself impossible to ignore by leaving. She had always been impossible to ignore. He had simply trained himself not to look. Claire Bennett heard about the empty Luna chair before she heard about Adrian's confession. News traveled strangely across treaty roads. Not quickly exactly. Carefully. Through merchants who pretended not to gossip while unloading grain. Through border guards who repeated only what duty allowed. Through letters folded twice and delivered by neutral riders who knew better than to look curious. By the fifth morning after leaving Blackwood Palace, Claire understood two things. The council hall still kept her chair empty, and no one had touched the silver clasp. She received the news in the breakfast room of Bennett House, where pale winter sunlight spread across old oak floors and the smell of warm bread drifted from the kitchen. Her cousin Emily was reading trade reports beside the window. Aunt Margaret poured tea with the calm precision of a woman who had survived enough men in power to respect silence more than performance. Claire sat between them with a Bennett ledger open before her, one finger resting beside a line her father had written years ago. Never let a throne make you grateful for being used. She had not remembered that sentence until she came home. Home. The word still felt unfamiliar. Not painful, just new. Bennett House did not move around her like a palace waiting for her labor. No servant stood nervously outside her door with 3 crises before dawn. No elder called her name only after something had gone wrong. No alpha king sat close enough to be loved and far enough to deny her. Here, people knocked before entering. They asked whether she wanted breakfast before handing her work. They called her Lady Claire Bennett because that was her name, not because Adrian had failed to decide what else she should be. The merchant from Eastford says Blackwood Palace has postponed 2 councils, Emily said, trying to sound casual and failing. Claire turned a page. Only 2. Emily looked up. Aunt Margaret gave the smallest warning glance, but Claire almost smiled. Almost. Not with cruelty. With distance. The kind that made old pain feel less like a blade and more like whether she had already walked through. Emily lowered the report. They say the Alpha King ordered every file you prepared to be reviewed aloud. Claire's fingers stilled. The room remained quiet. Margaret set the teapot down. And? Claire asked. And the Luna chair remains empty. Emily hesitated. With your clasp on it. Claire looked toward the window. Beyond the glass, Bennett Land stretched under frost, modest and stubborn. Stone walls. Bare trees. Smoke rising from cottages that needed roof repairs before deeper snow. A real place. A place with needs that did not require her to disappear into someone else's shadow. That chair was empty before I left, Claire said. Emily's expression softened. You were sitting in it. No, Claire replied quietly. My body was. No one answered. That was the mercy of Bennett House. People allowed truth to finish echoing before trying to improve it. Later that afternoon, Claire walked to the western field road alone. She wore a gray cloak, plain gloves, and her mother's silver ring. No moonstone. No royal clasp. No symbol given privately by a man who had never made her public enough to protect. The cold air touched her throat, and for the first time in years, the absence felt clean. At the lower fence, 2 tenant women waited with a list of repairs. Claire spoke with them for nearly an hour, noting broken storage doors, missing winter cloth, and a dispute over shared grazing land. Small matters, perhaps, but small matters became suffering when rulers ignored them. Claire had learned that in a palace that called itself powerful. When she returned near dusk, a neutral rider was waiting at the front steps. Not a Blackwood guard. Good. He bowed and offered a sealed packet. For Lady Claire Bennett. She accepted it. The seal belonged to Noah Reed. Inside was a brief report. Formal at first. Then, near the bottom, one sentence written in a hand less steady than the rest. He told the council they had mistaken your silence for duty. Claire read it once. Then again. Something moved in her chest. Not hope. Not forgiveness. Acknowledgement, perhaps. Late enough to ache. Small enough not to matter. Aunt Margaret came to stand beside her. Will you answer? Claire folded the paper carefully. No, because you are angry. Claire looked toward the road leading east. The road back to Blackwood Palace. Back to the chair. Back to the man who had finally looked at the space she left behind and called it loss. Because I am no longer explaining myself to rooms that only listen after I leave them, she said. That night, Claire placed Noah's report inside the Bennett ledger and closed it. Outside, snow began falling over the fields. Quietly, softly, without asking anyone to witness it. Claire stood by the window until the glass reflected her face back at her. Soft, tired, whole enough to continue. Somewhere far east, Adrian Blackwood was learning what her absence meant. Here, Claire Bennett was learning that she did not have to become an absence to be real. The formal request came from Blackwood Palace on the 7th morning. Not through royal command. Not through a guard carrying Adrian's personal seal. Through the treaty office, folded correctly, addressed correctly, and delivered by a neutral rider who waited outside Bennett House without stepping past the first stone marker. Claire noticed that before she opened it, Adrian had learned the shape of a boundary. That did not mean he understood the cost of crossing one. Aunt Margaret stood beside the study hearth while Claire broke the seal. Emily hovered near the window with the kind of curiosity she was too polite to admit. The letter was brief. The Winter Trade Review required Bennett approval on 3 border routes. Alpha King Adrian Blackwood requested permission to attend in person. Requested. Claire read the word twice. Once, that word from him would have broken her. It would have sounded like change. Like humility, like proof that the man who had given her 1,000 tomorrows had finally found one worth keeping. Now it only sounded like a door being touched from the other side. Claire set the letter on the desk. The review does not require him. Aunt Margaret's mouth softened. No, can the matters be handled by council representatives? Easily. Emily looked between them. Will you refuse? Claire looked down at her bare throat, reflected faintly in the window glass. No clasp. No moonstone. No private symbol heavy with public emptiness. Yes. The answer came without anger. That was how she trusted it. Anger still belonged to him in some way. Peace did not. She took a clean sheet of Bennett stationery and dipped the pen. For years, she had written around Adrian's pride. Softened terms. Cushioned truth. Chosen phrases that let him keep authority while accepting correction. It was strange how quickly the hand remembered freedom once it stopped protecting a man from consequences. Your presence is not required for the Winter Trade Review. Bennett representatives will meet appointed Blackwood Council delegates under neutral supervision. Lady Claire Bennett. She signed the name slowly. Not because she hesitated. Because it deserved to be written with care. The reply left before noon. Claire watched the rider carry it down the frost road until the trees took him from view. Then she turned back to the work waiting on her own desk. Roof timber requests. Grain allocation. A petition from 3 widows asking for shared pasture rights. Small problems. Real problems. Problems that did not care whether an alpha king had finally learned to miss the woman he had kept unnamed. By evening, Noah Reed arrived with the Blackwood delegation papers. He came alone, under neutral escort, and bowed at the threshold of Bennett House. Lady Bennett. Claire almost corrected him to Lady Claire, then stopped. Bennett sounded good on his tongue, not as possession, as recognition. Captain Reed. He handed her the packet. Council delegates will attend without His Majesty. Good. Noah's gaze lowered briefly. He read your refusal in the council hall. Claire opened the packet without asking why he had told her. And he did not argue. That gave her pause. Only for a second. That is new. Yes. Noah's voice remained quiet. It is. Claire looked up. The man before her seemed older than he had at Blackwood Palace, though only a week had passed. Perhaps everyone looked different outside the rooms where they were trained to obey. Captain, she said, do not bring me pieces of his regret as if they are messages. Noah accepted the correction with a small bow. I apologize. You meant kindly. Still, that was why she had always respected him. He could admit a wrong without turning it into a wound that needed tending. After he left, Claire carried the papers into the study and worked until the candles burned low. The Blackwood documents were more organized than before. Someone had clearly reviewed her old notes and tried to build a system that did not require her constant rescue. Good. Let the kingdom learn. Let Adrian learn. Not because she planned to return, but because no land should depend on one exhausted woman to keep it from collapsing. Near midnight, Claire stood from the desk and stretched her tired fingers. Outside, snow had begun again, light against the dark glass. In the reflection, she saw herself clearly. Soft round face, tired eyes, strong shoulders beneath a plain green shawl. No chair behind her, no throne beside her, no man close enough to mistake her patience for permanence. For the first time, the empty seat in Blackwood Palace no longer felt like the center of the story. It was only a chair, a place she had outgrown before anyone there realized she had never truly fit. Spring came to Bennett Land without asking Blackwood Palace for permission. It arrived first in the thaw along the stone fences, then in the soft green pushing through the garden beds behind Bennett House, then in the sound of workers laughing outside the granary because the western stores had survived winter with enough left to share. Claire Bennett stood at the edge of the council field one clear morning, wearing a plain cream dress beneath a moss-green cloak, her hands folded loosely before her. No silver clasp rested at her throat. No Luna chair waited behind her. No throne needed her silence to look steady. Around her, Bennett elders, tenant families, merchants, and guards gathered beneath the open sky for the spring allocation meeting. There was no blue ceremonial flame, no marble table, no royal banners large enough to make people forget who had done the work. Only rough benches, marked ledgers, warm sunlight, and a woman whose name was written at the top of every order she had prepared. Aunt Margaret stood to her right. Emily sat near the records table, already arguing softly with a clerk over road repair numbers. Noah Reed had arrived with the Blackwood delegation at dawn, carrying signed trade papers and a face carefully trained not to show too much. Alpha King Adrian Blackwood had not come. He had not asked again. That, Claire thought, was the first respectful thing his regret had done. The meeting began simply. Grain first, timber second, river access third. Claire spoke when needed and listened when others knew better. No one looked surprised when she corrected a route. No one laughed when she asked for a widow's petition to be heard before merchant profit. No one called her useful. They called her Lady Bennett. They called her fair. They called her difficult once, under someone's breath, and Claire nearly smiled because this time difficult meant she had not made herself smaller to be approved. Near noon, Noah approached with a small sealed box. Not hidden, not dramatic. From Blackwood Palace, he said. Claire looked at it, then at him. Personal, official, that mattered. She accepted it and broke the seal. Inside lay the silver Luna clasp, cleaned, repaired, resting over dark velvet. Beneath it was a narrow plaque engraved in formal script. Lady Claire Bennett, whose empty seat taught a kingdom what her silence had carried. Claire read it once. The field around her seemed to quiet, though no one had asked it to. The clasp caught the sunlight, beautiful as ever, still shaped like a crescent moon, still polished from years against her skin. Once, seeing it return might have undone her. Once, she might have taken it as an apology large enough to reopen a door. Now it was only an object, a witness, proof that even a symbol could change meaning after the woman wearing it changed first. Does he expect a reply? Claire asked. Noah shook his head. Noah paused. He said the record was owed, not offered. Something softened in her chest. Not love, not longing. A final easing around an old wound. Then tell the throne the record is received. Noah bowed. Nothing else. Claire looked across Bennett land. At the repaired fences. At the granary doors. At the people waiting for her to continue, not because they needed her to disappear into service, but because they trusted her judgment openly. Nothing else, she said. Later, after the meeting ended and the Blackwood delegation departed, Claire carried the box to the old bridge at the eastern edge of Bennett land. The same road beyond it led back to Blackwood Palace, back to the council hall, back to the empty Luna chair that had finally become impossible to ignore. Spring water moved beneath the bridge, bright and restless. Claire opened the box one last time. She did not throw the clasp away. That would have made it an act of anger, and anger no longer guided her hands. Instead, she closed the lid and carried it home to Bennett House, where she placed it on a high shelf beside her father's treaty books. Not as a promise, not as a wound, as evidence. Some things were too late to repair, but not too late to understand. By sunset, the spring meeting notes were finished under her own signature. Lady Claire Bennett. Outside, the land settled into gold light. Somewhere far east, Adrian Blackwood ruled with an empty chair to his left and a record that finally named the woman he had failed to see. Claire did not wish him ruin. She did not wish him peace either. She simply stopped wishing herself back into rooms that had mistaken her presence for permanence. That night, when Bennett House lit its windows one by one, Claire walked toward the warmth without looking over her shoulder. The road behind her remained open. The seat behind him remained empty. And for the first time, neither one was waiting.